Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I'm here today with David, and we are talking about, now I can't remember the name of the episode, transforming from bitter to blissful, transforming the sometimes bitter taste of life. And I don't know about you, but people, at least the people around me, friends, let's say, have been going through some rough patches. And inevitably, rough patches bring up old rough patches and wounds and hurts. And sometimes it's difficult not to get bitter over the way we're treated or unmet expectations. And today we're going to understand how to transform those situations that leave us feeling bitter and tap into the sweetness, the sweet spots that are eluding so many of us today, not simply in response to the bitterness, but to strive to live more in that sweet spot. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast where David and I, and sometimes our guests, share with our listeners the most powerful and practical tools to navigate the coming 7 days. As we do so, we look through the wisdom of Kabbalah and share wisdom and tools that you can use any day of the week, any week of the year. And this week specifically, we want to focus on this bitter theme because there are, even if we're living we're in a great relationship, we love our job, we're happy as clams, we face bitter people. And we have bitter family members. I'm going to keep using that word bitter because it really does awaken an attitude and an energy about life. You understand what I'm saying when I use the word bitter. And yet at the same time, the Kabbalists teach that we are meant to live a life of limitless pleasure, fulfillment, joy, and happiness. And so we want to ask ourselves, right? It can't be a popularity contest. It's not about who's in with God or who's doing all the right things, because you see plenty of people doing all the right things that are unhappy, and plenty of people getting away with unsavory things and living a pretty good life. So we want to break down some simple mindsets, wisdom, and tools to help us tap into that, a brighter place, let's call it. So David, where do you want to begin today?
I think first to help people understand what these emotions are about, because bitterness evolves. Let's talk about our own bitterness. It evolves from our own feelings of something happening that's unfair, or something that's happened that has disappointed us. And bitterness is a marriage of really two feelings. It's probably sadness and anger, because the sadness is what keeps us kind of internal and subdued. It's, as we've learned Kabbalistically, it's the female negative side, the female angel, negative angel, and also relates to the earth.
You have to explain that, because that can be very triggering for people.
We've spoken about this in other classes, where the idea that the negative side has a male and female component. And if you can't look at it as man, woman, you have to understand it's just two different types of energies. And what the male negative entity does, inspires us to be reactive and to follow our impulsive desires, our lustful desires. It's our addictions. This is the male negative side that entices us. And often what happens is we fall prey to our impulses and reactive behavior. We disconnect from the light of the Creator, and then we have chaos. And then what happens is that's when the female negative side comes in and tests a person. And what she does is she tests you with sadness and laziness and guilt. So
those are more emotions that don't inspire you to act. They inspire inaction.
Exactly. And actually, if you ask which one is more dangerous, it says that the female negative side is more dangerous because it's a longer period of time where a person is disconnected.
Well, also when people get angry, that many times pushes them to take action.
Right.
Whereas when you feel guilt, it's sort of immobilizing. When you're sad, you're paralyzed. So that it's different emotions.
And it lasts for a long time, because if you hold on to guilt, shame, or bitterness, you're usually holding on to it for days, weeks, months, and years. And then every moment that you hold on to it is a disconnection from the light of the Creator, versus a moment, an outburst of anger, or a negative action that feeds my addictive desires is a moment in time. So it's a moment of disconnection. And so this is why bitterness actually, if you had to look at all the chaos in your life and try to attribute it to addictive behavior or bitterness and sadness, you would actually probably see that 99% of the chaos we have in our lives wasn't because of our addictive behavior, but it was because of the sadness, the beating myself up, the guilt, and the shame, the bitterness that we hold on to after the fact. And it's interesting because most of the bitterness we feel towards other people, we think it's towards other people, but we're really just upset with ourselves. We're upset that we're upset. We're upset that it bothers us. We're upset that we created an opening for the other person to hurt us. We're upset that we didn't set boundaries soon enough. We're upset that we don't know how to really communicate. And even as you learn Kabbalah and you learn spirituality, you get upset with your own soul for attracting this into your life to awaken the things you need to change. This is all very subconscious in many ways. It's freeing to know that we chose people to come into our lives to awaken our fears, but there's also a part of us that is upset with ourselves for attracting this reality, knowing that we're fully responsible and that our soul came to this world in order to overcome these things. So I think it's first important to put into context negativity that comes from the female negative entity. We don't say the name, it's an angel actually. We don't say the name of the angel, but the initials are Lamed Taf. That's what we call her. And she's written the Zohar and thousands of years of scripture and literature, but it is a force. It is a negative force. And people are experiencing it on a daily basis. And there's a whole, the whole pharmaceutical side of our world is kind of addressing what this negative entity does to people, keeping them sad.
We have an episode about that coming up soon.
Excellent. So I think first to assess, the bitterness that we feel towards others is something that we need to explore inside of ourselves. Because what we also know is that when people are becoming the best versions of themselves, they release, even inside, the self-worth, the physical dopamine that makes them feel good. And then they relinquish the bitterness of other people. So what we're learning here is it's really not about the other people. And we know this because when we feel good, we're not that upset with other people anymore. The seed level of everything happens with our relationship with ourselves.
I'm so glad you said that, because as you were talking, you inadvertently touched on something that I have been fascinated with for the last few months, learning about and wrapping my head around the idea of understanding emotions. David said a few minutes ago that you're either looking at the sadness or the anger general categories. And I think that bitterness is a result of clumping emotions, or sometimes even not connecting with them. Somebody triggers you, you get upset, and you shove it aside, whether because you're busy at work or you're with your family, it's inconvenient to deal with what just happened, or maybe it's inappropriate to deal with it at the moment, whatever the situation. It may also be that dealing with it will require me to take responsibility or to address some negative pattern I have myself. So it's easier just to store it, file it for another time, maybe in therapy or whatever else it is. I'll deal with it later. And inevitably, we don't deal with it. And part of dealing with it is actually just pausing and saying, wow, that was hurtful. Or, wow, I'm feeling disappointed right now. But over the course of a day and weeks and months, we end up having these moments of anger, disappointment, frustration, anxiety. You count up all those uncomfortable, or I'm going to call them negative emotions. Of course, if you've been listening for any period of time, you know that nothing is negative unless we say it is. But the ignoring or allowing that opportunity to be in touch with what I'm feeling, unfortunately, allows those feelings to clump until we become a person who's known to be bitter. Or if you're thinking about a person that you know, a friend, a neighbor, a relative who's bitter over a divorce, over some injustice or unfairness, and they just drag it along with them, even though it was 20 years ago or what have you. What it really is a result of holding on to those negative emotions, not setting them free, not being in touch with why it happened, understanding the trigger, what motivated it, why it's especially sensitive for me or for the other person. And the whole idea is that by becoming more emotionally intelligent, it helps us get healthier emotionally and other people, meaning we can help others get more emotionally healthy. To me, a bitter person is someone who's emotionally unwell. If that's if they're known as a bitter person, it means that they're cooking themselves in their bitterness. It's who they are now. It's their identity. And whenever we deal with someone like that, whether we're recognizing while we're listening, okay, that's me. And by the way, I know people who justifiably, they were wronged or they were hurt or they were looked over, and that's a source of bitterness for them. At the same time, holding on to it is a choice. So even if you're looking, I was actually reading a really interesting story about a person who learned about this and then turned to their parent, which I think is harder than probably the hardest person to dig emotionally with, unless of course your parent is a therapist or a psychologist, and maybe they're very open to that kind of stuff. But that they said to their dad, their dad was angry about something, and they said, well, what's really going on? What are you really upset about? What are you so angry about? And they dug and they dug and they dug, and they found out he's not actually angry. He's jealous. And he's so jealous, but he can't express it. He hasn't identified it. So he just walks around as an angry person all the time because he's not getting enough attention from whoever he wants attention from. And I think that that's a great example, because I'm sure even that example of seeing someone who's angry, but recognizing, well, there's an emotion that's running underneath it that's not exactly anger. It's just anger is the result of not addressing the jealousy day in and day out. So part of, I think, the opportunity of this week is to be better at communicating, be better at airing out these emotions so that we don't become bitter. Bitterness is a result of holding on to negative emotions for a prolonged period of time. And if you'd like, let me know. Let me know in the comments. I can read to you studies that show that people who identify as angry, sad, bitter for prolonged periods of time, their health is compromised as a result of it. Their immune systems are weakened. Their blood pressure is affected. It literally cooks people. It transforms the chemical compounds in their body. So it really does support both our spiritual and physical well-being to work on our emotions, to be better at identifying them, expressing them, and helping others express them as well.
A practical step that I know helps me and helps our students when we recommend it to them is, and it's so practical, it's so easy to do, it's something that should be done right away when you start to feel the bitterness, the anger, and the sadness, is to write it down. Because when you write it down, you're accessing parts of your brain that are processing these thoughts and emotions differently. And it starts to put things into perspective. You're also challenging yourself to ask why I feel the way I feel. And sometimes we're not even sure why we feel what we feel. And as we start to write them down or to type them in your phone, type them on a computer, the picture becomes clear. Part of it is also that the bitterness is wrapped in a membrane of anxiety. And so anxiety comes from fear, and the fear is coming from some form of unfinished business. You know, when you have a to-do list that is growing, and there are things that you're supposed to do that you're not doing, this is where the anxiousness comes in, the anxiety comes in. This is the part of you that knows there's something that's open that hasn't been closed. There's something I should be doing right now that I'm avoiding. In Kabbalah, we call this the surrounding light that pressures our soul to come in to become what's called inner light. The surrounding light is our potential. It's what our soul is meant to manifest in this world. There's a certain amount of surrounding light that we all come to this world with. And when that baby is about to be born, when that light that is our potential wants to become revealed, we feel the pressure. We feel the anxiety. And what we need to do is not be passive in those moments, because when you're passive, then the energy forces its way in, and that's pain, and that's chaos. That's a nervous breakdown. That's a panic attack. What we need to do is to take action. And one of the actions is just to become clear on why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And I think writing it down is just an excellent way to start doing that. And you can start by saying, I feel bitter or sad about X, Y, and Z that's happened, or towards this person, or even towards myself. As you're typing this, you can be, I want to explore and know why these things are coming into my life. What is it about me that's attracting it? Is it, and then maybe a thought will come, because there's this concept Kabbalistically that if you seek out the Creator will find you. And so when we write things down, when we ask questions, it's a form of seeking out the Creator. It's a form of prayer. And you're building a vessel for answers to come to you. So as I'm literally typing on the computer, why am I so upset? A thought will come into your mind. That thought is the Creator answering. The thought would be, I'm upset because I don't know how to express myself. Or you need to express yourself. That'll be the thought that comes. And then you'll actually realize that you haven't done a good job of communicating your needs. This is a very common thing also in the workplace, that managers have expectations of the people under them. But those expectations have never been clearly communicated, both verbally and in writing. So you think that your employees are psychic, or they should just get your culture.
Or your husband, who should be psychic by now, but he's not.
Exactly. You would think by now, after 10, 15, 20 years.
What's it going to take? What's it going to take?
You should know exactly what I need, what I'm feeling.
And exactly what I like on my sandwich, right? All those things.
That's correct. And what's interesting is that the angel of forgetfulness is very active in relationships, in order to push us to give more and communicate more, and because that is a part of giving, right? So in Elisheva's example, to kind of support the men out there, Elisheva needs to consistently remind and share what she desires from her husband. Why? Because she's the vessel, and when the vessel stops requesting, asking, reminding of what brings her pleasure, there's no vessel anymore. So the reason why husbands forget is because the vessel stops sending out the signal. But what's happening here in the female's case is she's like, well, I spent the first 2 years setting the rules and my expectations.
Hey, we used to finish each other's sentences. Well, why do I even have to talk?
Well, that's my point. My point is, if the man is forgetting and the man is not channeling, it's because the vessel is not open to receive. It's a very deep concept, one that might be unpopular and even biased coming from a man. But I will say that most men I know, when they shut down, it's because they do not feel the desire from their partner. It's a desire that needs to be verbalized, not just thought privately. And there must be an inner craving, and the attention must be there. So this goes with everything. So the communication of what is needed is a big healing solution and a preventative antidote to the bitter feelings that come later when your expectations aren't met.
I'm going to go back, but just because David, we don't share notes with each other before episodes. We don't plan it. And so I'm just laughing at how perfectly David is meeting me where I was hoping this would go. I want to share with you just 2 points, 30 seconds, about the health benefits to expressing, which is what David was just talking about and what we spoke about before, the fact that being emotionally in touch with what it is you are actually feeling and being able to express it is actually a healthy thing to do. So this is from a book called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. And we can put the link in the description if you guys are interested. He says, feeling down which I think would qualify as bitter. Pessimism, apathy, depression is linked to low levels of serotonin and dopamine, the so-called feel-good neurotransmitters. Serotonin plays a role in pain perception, which may be why people experiencing negative emotions report more severe symptoms of illness, and nearly half of patients with depression also suffer aches and pains. Negative emotional states, anxiety, anger, sadness, and stress, are closely associated with unhealthy behaviors such as poor diet, smoking, excessive drinking, physical inactivity, and social isolation, many of which we found in a recent study with more than 5,000 teachers from across the United States. Those are the same lifestyle factors that contribute to our most feared and widespread illnesses: heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, addiction, and dementia. These conditions in turn have a devastating impact on our emotional lives, and the feedback loop turns into a downward spiral for our health, mental, and physical. Ultimately, they deepen our feelings of hopelessness and despair that we will ever manage to improve our moods or our health. Interestingly, we found that a positive workplace climate acted as a buffer for the deleterious effects of negative emotions on health outcomes for teachers. So I'm sharing that. I didn't plan to share that. Actually, I wanted to share something else from the book. But the reality is that speaking, expressing these things is literally what creates the vessel for the fulfillment to come. It's okay to say, I'm anxious right now, I'm angry right now, I'm stressed right now. And as I said before, to look deeper and say, well, wait a second, why? Where is it coming from? Maybe it's not stress. Maybe I'm just overwhelmed. I have a really long to-do list, or I didn't sleep last night, whatever it is. But what's really interesting, and I didn't think about it before we sat down, but the reality is, we're still in the month of Gemini, right? We have another about 7-8 days left. And one of the great gifts of Geminis is the gift of communication. They are great orators, writers. They have a gift for putting words together, for even being able to put together people. Like they're really great at orchestrating connections. And it would be, I think, the purpose, I don't know if it was an intentional or otherwise, but obviously it's happening for a reason, to be able to bring into our practice more mindful communication, more mindful expression around emotions and desires and needs, like David was talking about. This is a week, probably more than most of the year, where we have the support. Nothing's in retrograde, or actually only good things are in retrograde. There's nobody to blame if we can't express ourselves. Maybe it means just writing a letter, maybe journaling, or calling somebody that you feel won't judge you. Or in David's point, if you're in a partnership and you've been feeling your needs are not met, or you're not disconnected, maybe you're bitter about something, or you feel your partner's bitter about something, this is the week to communicate it, to express it, to break it down, and to really know that you're supported by the universe, even if it's uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the reasons that most people shy away from these kind of conversations is, yes, it's uncomfortable to express our needs. Maybe we're afraid to seem weak or wounded or broken. But even though it may be uncomfortable initially, or you may be uncomfortable listening to someone talk about it, the long-term benefits far outweigh those moments of discomfort.
In addition to writing it down as the first stage of the practical tool, there's many people have spoken about this, but being able to then take what you've written down in your new understanding of the situation and your feelings to write a letter that you don't intend to send, but you write a letter to the person that you feel bitter or resentful towards. And expressing your emotions and your why, and going back in time, and especially as you're writing the letter, more will come to the surface, because the feelings that we have aren't often from the things that we know about.
Well, that's the whole point, is that you may be upset about something, and then in that process of writing, realize it's making you, it's reminiscent of a time 20 years ago when you were hurt in a similar way, and you're bringing that relationship into this one.
Correct. It's both. It's the stuff that you've suppressed and you're not conscious of in the current relationship. And then, of course, you'll see the connection from the past. And that's all part of the beautiful process of learning more about yourself and the patterns that we're engaging in. Because ultimately, if there's a pattern in our life, it's because it serves us. And it's a desire of ours to create that pattern, because it brings us some form of pleasure. To have an unavailable person around you serves you in that you don't have to be emotionally available or committed. right? But you're focusing on the painful part about this, why this person isn't giving you what you want. Or on the other side, if you have someone who's very needy or clingy, and is not setting boundaries for you, and that's beginning to make you not appreciate them or feel disgusted by that, there's a part of you that enjoys feeling like the what's the word I'm looking for? The one that's in control, the one that is being served, the one that is empowered, and you're emasculating the other side. So everything that is a pattern is ultimately because it serves us, and subconsciously our soul is requesting that these situations come about again and again. So as we're going back to writing the letter out, getting it all out, stepping away, coming back, adding more to the letter, not sending it, not necessarily. Sometimes it is good to send it. But it's all from the point of view of being able to express it and get it outside of your body. Because once it's already at the body level, that's just the final phase before it becomes some kind of a physical ailment or sickness. Because it starts in the metaphysical, and then it starts going down, and you start to feel that anxiety and that bitterness in your body. And the body needs to cleanse it. Because naturally things attack the viruses. We attack the things that are what we perceive to be as an enemy. And when the body sees that you're holding on to this stress, it begins to attack it. And this is what pain is. Pain is sending a signal to you that's saying, hey, I can't hold on to this anymore. I need to let it go. This is often why after physical pain people go through, they feel cleansed, they feel lighter, they feel enlightened. Because it's that process of letting go of that pain. But unfortunately, it's the final process that happens when we're not proactively letting it go.
I want to give 2 in-the-moment tools. David, I think the writing exercise is so powerful and so profound, but while you're being triggered, you can't really say to the other person, give me a minute, I need to write myself a letter, or I need to write you a letter that I'm not going to send you. There's a couple things that you can do in the moment, whether you are recognizing the bitterness is coming up for you. And again, whether the bitterness is more on the anger, anxiety, stress spectrum, or if it's more of the heavier sadness, guilt, blame, shame spectrum. The first thing is actually breathing. And I know it may sound cliche, but most of us, when we feel triggered, we go into physiological response that mimics danger. The body perceives there is a threat. That's literally what happens when we're triggered is signals go off in the body, in the brain that tell us, conserve your resources. There's a tiger coming, when there is in fact no tiger and probably no threat of bodily harm at all. It's simply the emotional system. The perceived threat is taken in the same way, whether it is an actual threat or simply an emotional threat. The habit of mindful breathing is a really powerful tool. It's taught in probably every single spiritual circle, not only as a means of resetting the nervous system, but also by allowing you, and this is the second tool. So the first, you've got to be able to pause. You've got to be able to pause and take a breath. David and I, we just started a 10-week level 1 course. That's why in that level 1 course, the first thing we teach is to pause. The first homework you get, and for those of you that are in the class, we see you. If you haven't joined the class yet, you can still do so. The link is in the description and on weeklyenergyboost.com. We would love to have you. You can catch up with the recordings. But that's why that first lesson is focused on interrupting those mindless and unconscious patterns that lead us at the end of the day to feeling like we've had it. So it starts with pausing, taking a breath. And then the second step, which is again, part of Kabbalah, but also pretty universal, is reframing. And what I mean by that, we can go back to the example of the father who was having a temper tantrum, or who was exploding with anger, right? Looking at him and saying, okay, I can see a really angry 78-year-old guy right now, or I can reframe what I'm seeing and know that he must be super hurt, wounded, something must be going on. Maybe he didn't eat enough, get enough sleep, right? To really give my most compassionate and empathetic translation to his behavior, because if I allow his behavior to trigger my own reaction, there's no resolution. I'm only fueling the fire. So being both in that place of being able to pause, whether it's I'm reacting or the person in front of me is reacting, to pause, to take a few cleansing breaths, and to allow that moment or two that you have to quickly reframe, to reappraise the situation. Yeah, okay, the cashier in front of me is being really difficult, but how can I awaken light? How can I be the light in this situation? That's really classes 2, 3, 4, and 5. How can I be the light in this situation? I can be the most compassionate and empathetic person I can be, not for them, for me, for my health, for my well-being, for my consciousness, and for the world. Because the more darkness there is, the darker the world is. The more light there is, the brighter the world is. You good?
Yeah. In summary, I think it's important for everybody. We don't just share concepts randomly. There's an opening in the universe spiritually to help us with these feelings that we've been holding on to, both about ourselves and about other people. Make this the week that we open ourselves, we ask the Creator, we ask the universe to send us the support system and the consciousness to be able to transform the bitterness into happiness. And it's not something that we need to hold on to anymore. And as a result, we don't need to keep attracting these relationships that hurt us.
So true. So much unnecessary resentment and suffering can be released if we'll just jump on that, the opportunity that this week has. It's very exciting for all of us. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also visit our website, weeklyenergyboost.com, where you can join our Kabbalah 1 course and find out about all the other interesting things we want our listeners to know about. You can click the donate button there to support our podcast, as well as share this episode, like it, rate it, and review us. Wherever you're listening, you help us get out in front of more people, and we really appreciate it. Have a fabulous week, and we'll see you next time on the Weekly Energy Boost.